rain not arriving until the overnight period. It is again going to be mild, highs of around 14 or 15 Celsius in the southeast, something a little bit fresher starting to push in from the northwest behind the front. Then into Wednesday, and this is when we're likely to see the heaviest rain and some strong blustery winds. The wettest weather likely to be across parts of the southwest. Here we're likely to see some disruption with some flooding possible, as well as some issues on the roads. More unsettled weather to come as we go through later this week and into the weekend. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Good evening to you. A question, do you think smartphones should be allowed in schools? There's new guidance now from the government today that says no. Very simply, no, they shouldn't be. Do you agree with that? Some people are saying that those policies are basically not even worth the paper that they have been written on. And Labour, they are considering creating citizens' assemblies to help them make key policy decisions. Is this a good idea or not? Also, would you even volunteer to be on one of those things? And get this, a fire service has come under fire today. Did you see what I did there? Yes. They basically refused to get into 4-foot floodwater to help rescue a motorist that had been trapped in his car. Long story short, it was left to a member of public to help rescue the fella instead. Why? Well, you guessed it, health and safety. I'm asking you, do you think these rules sometimes are more a hindrance than a help? And last but not least, do you think all drivers should have to retake their driving test at the ripe old age of 65 years of age? That is a proposal that Parliament looks set to discuss. Your thoughts on that? Yes, indeed. We'll be debating all of that and more. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live to Polly Middlehouse for tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. Let's start with some breaking news this hour. The 3 children found dead at a house in Bristol yesterday have been named by police. They are siblings Fares Bash, who is aged 7, 3-year-old Dewberry Bash and 9-month-old Mohammed Bash. A police presence remains in the area after the children were found dead yesterday by police officers who were responding to a welfare call. A 42-year-old woman was arrested at the scene. She's been taken to hospital. She does remain in police custody. Those names released in the last half hour. Now, a man who piloted a people-smuggling small boat across the English Channel has been found guilty of manslaughter. If you're watching on TV, you'll be able to see this exclusive footage obtained by GB News of the rescue operation, which took place in December of 2022. 4 migrants had drowned during that channel crossing after the boat had run into some difficulty. Ibrahima Bar, who's a Senegalese migrant, claimed he'd sailed before and that meant he was allowed to make the journey free of charge, while the others had paid thousands for the crossing. The judge in the case said the boat was navigated using only mobile phone technology, and as a result of his actions, 4 people lost their lives. Now, Kemi Badenoch has been taking aim at former Post Office chairman Henry Staunton in the Commons today, accusing him of making a series of inaccurate claims. A row broke out yesterday after Mr Staunton suggested he'd been made a scapegoat for the Post Office scandal and that the government had deliberately delayed compensation payouts. But speaking in the Commons, the business secretary refuted those claims robustly.
Mr Staunton claimed that when he was first appointed as chair of the Post Office, he was told by a senior civil servant to stall on paying compensation. There is no evidence whatsoever that this is true. In fact, on becoming Post Office chair, Mr Staunton received a letter from the Bay's Permanent Secretary, Sarah Mumby, on the 9th of December 2022. It welcomed him to his role, making it crystal clear that successfully reaching settlements with victims of the Post Office scandal should be one of his highest priorities.
Kemi Badenoch speaking about an hour ago. Now, specialist dive teams are continuing to search the River Soar in Leicester this evening in a search for a 2-year-old boy who fell into the water yesterday. Officers are saying rising river levels and recent heavy rainfall has resulted in very difficult search conditions. Leicestershire Police Assistant Chief Constable Michaela Kerr says the force is stepping up its search efforts to find the little boy.
We have today reinforced our resources searching for that little boy. We have been able to secure additional support from colleagues in local regions and from national police resources. We are using specialist divers within the River Soar, and we continue to use the helicopter and aerial technology to try and locate the little boy. Our priority for Leicestershire Police is to make sure that we find this little boy.
Michaela Kerr of Leicestershire Police. Now, new guidance was issued today by the government for teachers in England on restricting the use of smartphones in schools as concerns continue to grow over the impact of social media on young people. Head teachers can now choose to include a ban on phones in their school's behaviour policy, with provisions for searches if necessary. But a union representing head teachers says the guidelines aren't needed because robust rules already exist. A Just Stop Oil protester has defended the disruption caused by her demonstration, arguing that dramatic action was needed to get the group's point across. Cambridge University student Cressida Gethin was convicted of causing a nuisance after she climbed onto a gantry over the M25. During her trial, the court heard the protest caused the delay of almost 4,000 British Airways passengers, not to mention the thousands of people trapped in traffic as a result. Miss Gethin told GB News she never intended to cause any harm.
Well, I needed to protest in a way that would break through the media narrative, break through and get the message heard that 40 degrees in the UK is extraordinary. There's a massive moral dilemma involved, and whilst I feel it was absolutely necessary, I don't want to disavow the fact that it will have had an effect on people, and that doesn't sit easy with me.
Campaigners have lost a High Court challenge over renewed plans to build a road tunnel near Stonehenge in Wiltshire. The Department of Transport approved the plans in July last year, despite concerns over its potential environmental impact. The Save Stonehenge World Heritage Site Group launched a bid in the High Court to halt the construction. But a judge to dismiss that today. National Highways says the tunnel will remove the sight and sound of passing traffic in the area and cut journey times for drivers. Lord Cameron has been visiting some key battle sites in the Falkland Islands as part of a high-profile visit to show that the islands are a valued part of the British family. The historic visit, the first by a foreign secretary in 30 years, comes amid renewed calls by Argentina for negotiations on the island's future. At Goose Green, one of the key sites from the war in 1982, he visited the museum there and spoke to local residents at the community hall. He also visited San Carlos and laid a wreath at the memorial to those who lost their lives there. Lord Cameron says the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands is non-negotiable, which he says is in line with the islanders' desire themselves to remain British. For the very latest news stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Polly. I've got to say, gosh, some of those stories, they're very, very sad, aren't they? There's 3 children there in Bristol and, of course, that little boy in the river. Really, really sad news, of course. I'm hoping and praying for a good outcome in that latter case. Just so sad. If anyone does know any good news, any positive, uplifting things, I'm always open-eared to those kind of things, because sometimes it can be hard yards, can't it, listening to the news in this country, I've got to say. Anyway, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. I've got business owner, political commentator and former Labour councillor Kevin Craig. Good evening
Michelle,
to you.
got some good news.
What is it?
2 by-election wins for Labour last week.
Took him a couple of seconds to get that one in, didn't it? Do you think that's good news, Lord Moylan, alongside him?
No, I don't think it's good news at all.
Oh, there you go. The bubble was bare.
Sorry.
You know, with Kevin in the lead, we're heading over the edge of a cliff.
Oh, and there you go. That was supposed to be a nice, cheery segment. On a serious note, though, anyone out there, anything good happening whereabouts you are, do get in touch with me, because you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us, it is about you guys as well. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you can get hold of me, or you can tweet me, X me at GBNews. Let's start then, shall we, talking about, it's a subject I don't always get into, the goings-on within schools, but smartphones, you know, everyone these days pretty much has them, certainly as well young children. I've got to say, I'm not sure how healthy that is. Anyway, the government's come out today with a new policy in this regard. Let's have a listen to Gillian Keegan, our Education Secretary.
What we want to do is empower head teachers to make sure that mobile phones are, you know, not used in school, and I think that's something that all parents will probably welcome. Oh, there's lots of problems. It's texting and being on social media when you should be, you know, being taught and learning your lessons. It's sometimes bullying, and sometimes it's, you know, people sort of ostracizing somebody on social media. That's something else that you see. You know, it's very pervasive.
There you go. Let me start with you, Lord Moylan. This whole notion, I mean, I want to be clear, everybody, by the way, because a lot of schools are already doing stuff like this in schools. This policy today, I'll just bring you up to speed if you're not already. There's 4 options basically on it. Option 1, no mobile phones on the school premises at all. Option 2, mobile phones handed in on arrival. Option 3, mobile phones kept in a secure location. Option 4, never used, seen or heard. Basically, you can have it at the bottom of your bag switched off. Where are you on all of this, Lord Moylan?
Well, I personally don't think mobile phones should be allowed in schools, but I think the important thing here is the government isn't actually telling head teachers this is what you've got to do. They're saying if this is a problem for you, here are 4 options, and if you choose one of those options, then the government, and as far as we understand it, the law will back you up. You have the right to do this, and these are suggested options you could take, and they range from the milder to the more extreme. But it remains the choice of the head teacher, the school's policy, what to do. I personally think not having them in school is a really good idea. It doesn't mean to say non-smartphones can't be available. It doesn't mean to say that children have to totally have contact with their parents when they're travelling home or whatever. But smartphones are addictive and they do distract. And I think, this really the key point is we need children to pay attention to what's going on in school.
By the age of 12, 97% of children own a phone. I don't think it's a smartphone, but they own certainly a phone. Is that necessary in this day and age? You tell me. Where are you on it, Kevin?
Well, I look forward, Michelle, in a few years' time, when your son starts having the conversations with you, right, based on peer pressure and asking for a phone, OK? It's a nightmare, and it starts earlier and earlier, and it's hard for parents to say no devices. I do agree with much of what Daniel said. I think mobile phones, with all the wonders of technology, they're great, but they are often very unhelpful to learning. And I think today's story is basically a rehash of old news by the government, but it gives head teachers now, get on with it. Get on with it. Control mobile devices in schools because you need to.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying about the whole peer pressure scenario, but what I've never really understood, and yeah, we can have this conversation in about 10 years or so again, you ask me back about this, but why don't parents come together then and say, look, collectively, all these kids in the class, they want these smartphones and stuff, they're aged 10 years of age, we don't think it's appropriate, let's collectively come together as a parental group and we all draw the line and say, no, kids, you're not having them.
Michelle, it sounds so easy like that, right? But I can tell you, as the father of two daughters, aged 18 and 16, that would never have worked, OK? If I'd have ever said to Nuala and Tully, you're not having them, they would have just not had it from me and my partner. It doesn't work like that. It's impossible.
Yeah, but you're buying them, Mum. You're buying the phones for them.
You are, but they talk then about they're isolated, they don't want to be the odd ones out. It's just never going to happen. So what's really important is that schools do this. I think it's really good. And can I say, I've got a good friend, so many viewers of your show, one of them, Edith Pittman in Cumbria, in Kendal, she thinks the same about this of an older generation, and I think
where's Edith come from?
Because she's one of your viewers, and she passionately says how much she loves the show.
Oh, hello, Edith. Oh, we like that. Hello, love it. You're watching tonight.
Big fan.
I think you are... it's just you're kind of offsetting your parental duties a little bit. You're saying, oh, yeah, it's really hard. Parenting's supposed to be hard. Good parenting is supposed to be hard.
Listen, anyone listening to this or watching it who's got kids over the age of 10 is saying, let Michelle Dewberry give me a ring when her son is old enough.
Do you have kids or grandkids maybe over the age of 10 or thereabouts? Are you in this camp now, which Kevin's explaining to me, that actually these 10-year-olds run the roost in your house and it's on they are dictating to you what you go out and spend your wages on, Kevin, and provide them with £1,000 plus phone? Am I like being a little bit naive here? Because I've got to tell you, if my 10-year-old thought he was coming into my house telling me that, Mummy, you're going to give me this £1,000 plus for this telephone so I can be like my friends, my child would be getting a very short, sharp, no, I'm not, that's not going to happen, young man. Where are you on it? This whole notion that parents actually, because we've discussed the school thing, I think we're all in agreement actually that within a school environment, get off your telephone. So we've got a nice element of agreement, we like that. But this parental aspect, do you think that parents need to be a bit tougher? Am I being a bit naive or what?
I'm not a parent. I've never been a parent, so I don't think I'm the best person.
Are you a godparent?
I am a godparent. I'm a godparent to... I've got 7 godchildren, believe it or not.
Cool, blimey.
That's quite a lot.
That's expensive, Daniel.
I drew the line at...
You must have a bob or two then, because people tend to choose godparents.
Well,
they think they've got a bit of...
They think, you see, that I've got some money. But they're going to discover in due course that it's all been blown. None of it's going to be left. Anyway, whatever little there is. So I don't think I'm in a position to preach to people, but I will say that in an older generation, I'm going back, there was a thought amongst parents that actually saying no to children was good for them. It wasn't just a case of I'm saying no because I don't want to say yes, but actually denying children some of the things they wanted was good for them because... And I think that idea has gone. I think there are parents, of course, who still say no because it's a ridiculous amount of money to spend on, be it a phone or something else. But when you see the money they do spend on children sometimes and what they do, I think this idea that actually bringing up children to a sense of self-denial has gone. And I think that is a bit of a loss. I think it is good for their character if they learn that some things, they're not going to get everything they want.
No, I think making sure you don't spoil kids and discipline saying no is one thing, but I'm just really interested if there are any viewers or listeners with kids, 13 and over, who've said no phone, no device. I'd love to meet one.
Well, like I said, you need to reconnect with me in about 10 years' time. I will be the first. I will be the first person.
No, you won't. You'll be eating your hat.
I don't think. You see, I was at Legoland this weekend. Other theme parks are available, everyone. And I was really struck, actually, by the amount of children, and I'm talking like often as well babies, or not babies, but small toddlers in prams. And they were in their prams with like an iPad type thing, a tablet, in front of them. And I'm thinking to myself, you've paid all this money, you've brought your children to somewhere that,
hard to see that, yeah.
And then you're shoving your kid around in this buggy, watching whatever it is on an iPad.
Yeah,
like, why?
Agreed.
Why would you do such a thing? Anyway, Catherine Berbelsing, I've got to say, I quite like this lady. You'll know she's very tough. She's the headmistress of Michaela's school. She tweeted out today about the smartphone thing. Excellent news, but we need much more than this. Smartphone and social media must be banned for under 16-year-olds. But again, maybe I'm being really harsh. Maybe you're shouting at me at home saying I'm naive. As a parent, why can't you just stop your child going on social media?
It's very difficult to enforce that. I mean, I ultimately agree with you about that it's parents' responsibility, parents or carers to do this, but it's really difficult, and I do believe in discipline, and there have been loads of rows in my house about phones, and there will carry on being it. And the youngest has had to sign up to not deleting TikTok till her GCSEs are over. So I'm living this right now, and I'm glad that schools have already been able to and should carry on taking a tough line. But, there are the bigger challenges in schools about funding, budgets, staff and buildings.
Indeed. Louise says, Michelle, I've got a 10-year-old. He's just started walking to school by himself, so he phones me whilst he's walking. Yeah. He then switches it off and then hands it into the office at school to collect at home time. She says it all works absolutely perfectly. Andy, you make an interesting point there, my friend. He says, Michelle, mobile should be banned not just in schools, but also in Parliament. I can tell you now, you brought a glint to my eye then, because I was thinking about the guy I called Tractor Boy. Do you remember what he was up to? Looking at a brand of tractors, apparently, whilst Parliament was sitting. Do you remember that? So actually, that's probably not a little bad idea that you throw in there, Andy. Anyway, look, you guys are bringing in good news. I like that. I'll have some of that for you after the break. I've also got lots I want to discuss with you. Citizens' assemblies. Do you think that is the future in this country to help our politicians decide key policy decisions? Would you volunteer to be on one of these assemblies or not? Tell me and I'll see you in 2.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. The Conservative peer, Lord Daniel Moylan, and the former Labour councillor Kevin Craig alongside me. Just talking about telephones there, Lee says, when are we going to stop just banning things that we've got issues with? I don't think we should ban phones in schools, but perhaps we should put them into lockers. I also think it would be a good idea, he says, to have lessons in school on the safety of using mobile phones and social media. Do you think smartphones have been a force for good in our society? So many people now, they're addicted to them, aren't they, all the time, just sitting there. Hours and hours go by, don't they, when you're scrolling at all kinds of stuff. You go for dinner with someone now, look around the restaurant, everyone's just sat there on their mobile phones. I find that latter one the height of rudeness.
It is rude.
I think it is as well. I constantly argue about this in my private life, because I think if you're going for dinner with someone, get off your telephone.
Yeah, silly man.
Maybe I'm just a bit boring. Maybe it says more about me than the person sitting opposite me. Anyway, Labour, the Labour Party, is working on plans now to introduce citizens' assemblies if the party gets into power. Long story short, this will be a collection of the great British public, and they'll be getting involved, debating, looking at evidence, making recommendations, etc. It could be anything, really, from housing, devolution stuff, constitutional reform, so on and so forth. Now, in Ireland, they have these citizen assemblies already, and what a treat for you, ladies and gents at home, because I have not one but two UK-Irish dual citizens on my panel tonight. What do you make of these citizens' assemblies?
I think they're very, very dangerous indeed, because they're a means of undermining our representative democracy. They're used in Ireland, indeed, and as they will be here, as a means whereby the powers that be can manipulate opinion. The people who end up on them and are willing to give the time to them are normally committed to a particular side in a debate. And they are there, as the Irish say, they prepare the ground for change. But that's the change that the powers that be want to see achieved anyway. And they move in a particular direction. They undermine Parliament. And I will just say, we did have a meeting of the biggest citizens' assembly that we've ever had in this country in 2016.
We did.
And Sir Keir Starmer wouldn't accept the result because he didn't like it. So, let's be honest.
What's that about? Forgive me, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
This is anti-democratic.
He's on about when people turn out and vote Brexit.
This is anti-democratic. And it also shows, in my view, that it's a distraction because Labour doesn't have any policies. So let's see what their policies are rather than, all right, fair enough, we get closer to an election, they have to have a manifesto. I'm not saying they have to have all their policies out on show today. But we need to see what Labour's policies are. This is not a policy. This is a way of not talking about policy and kicking it all the other side of the general election.
So it would be a disaster, would it?
Well, where to start with there? This is where the consensus ends, OK? Because what we're talking about is the fact that Keir's new Chief of Staff, relatively new, Sue Gray, has given quotes to a book coming out at the end of the month, and in it, she talks about importing the idea of citizens' assemblies from Ireland. And I think, actually, there's a different way of looking at this, which is a lot of listeners and viewers of this channel are interested in politics that listens more to people, that talks down to them less, right? And I think we should look at this idea, which I don't know the detail of. I look forward to seeing more of it when the book comes out and talking to Sue Gray if I have a chance. We should look at this as select committees that people can get involved with themselves. Ultimately, as it's happened in Ireland, it still has to come back to government, but people want to be involved more and they don't want stuff done to them. And that's why there's a, you know, Keir Starmer has spoken about, and ignoring for now Daniel's jibe that Labour hasn't got any policies, because we could do an hour on the policies we have got. But Keir Starmer is into politics that does less to people and asks them more. And ultimately, it still has to come back through the Parliament, common laws and the government. I think it's interesting because people are in a way fed up with the political class not listening enough.
But then, Sarah, help me understand a few things, because already when we're trying to create new laws and all the rest of it, often we do have a consultation period, don't we? So people, your average Joe, can get involved and give their feedback. So the average Joe, if we want to call them that, they are already involved in policy and shaping outcomes and letting them, you know, letting their thoughts be known and all the rest of it. So to me, you've already got that step. The second thing is, many people will say that Parliament essentially is some form of citizens' assembly because we go out, we involve ourselves in the, you know, general election or local election or whatever. The very point being that, you know what, in my general life, I've got better things to do than think about X, Y and Z. So I've voted you, off you go, and I can interact with you. If I'm in your constituency, I can get in touch, email you, whatever. So isn't this just a form of kind of book passing?
I can see in debating terms why you might say that, why one might say that. But, you know, there's a lot of things currently wrong with our democracy, right? We don't have proportional representation. Good. I disagree, Daniel. I think there's too many votes discounted in this country.
Not discounted. Okay. Every vote counts.
Well, it doesn't. There's a disagreement about that, actually, because loads of votes in seats where one MP's got a massive majority, you know, don't count, right?
They do count.
But hang on. But to go back to, Michelle, your question, I think that it is in addition to Parliament, and in Ireland, some very difficult constitutional issues have benefited from this system. It still
like
comes
abortion
back,
and things like that.
Yeah, back to abortion, and there's the live discussions now about more constitutional reform. You know, I think there are elements of this that are worth looking at, because I think what people of all politics do agree is there's a lot of disillusionment with politics and people feel that their voice doesn't matter. I mean, don't we?
But then, I mean...
Well, look. The way, as I understand it, the way it works in Ireland, you have a panel randomly selected of 99 persons.
Plus a chair.
Plus an independent some moderator to manage and the whole thing. What do the rest of the country do while these 99 persons are deliberating on their behalf? These 99 persons who haven't been elected, who have no mandate for what they're discussing, who are filling in the details of a policy that people might well not agree with or might want to have a say on. And yet, on the other hand, they're being asked to vote for their MP, their TDs, as they are in Ireland, to vote for their TDs to sit in Parliament and twiddle their thumbs while all this is going on. Of course, I understand, you know, any decision has to go through either a legislative process or a constitutional referendum in Ireland if it meets that standard, that threshold. Of course, I understand that happens, but by then you've shifted the debate so far in a particular direction that almost all of these decisions are preordained and very difficult to see them reversed. And that's how a lot of people see it in Ireland. And they have no say in it. They have no vote in it. They have no say in it. It's anti-democratic.
Look, there's very healthy disagreement around that. A lot of people like it, think it's been very beneficial. But, you know...
Are you one of those people? Because I've had a couple of people already from Ireland getting in touch, actually, not liking these setups at all. Liam says it's basically a cop-out by our government, unrepresentative and just a way of softening up the public for unpalatable measures. Martin, you say, Michelle, to the point which was made earlier, surely this is what the House of Commons is supposed to be, or it certainly was when it got set up. He says, doesn't this just show how Westminster has essentially forgotten its core purpose? Keith says only left-wing activists will volunteer for citizens' assemblies, and he says, his words, not mine, that's why Starmer's sneaky socialists are in favour of them.
Keith, that's a bit rude, mate, OK, saying that, because basically the idea...
What's rude about that?
Well, it's not... The idea is only socialists or lefties that are going to get involved in this. Actually, you'll find that some of the most involved people in communities, some of the people you hear most from on big planning permission campaigns, are from the right of centre in politics. So Keith there doesn't sound sound like what one would call a swing voter. Sounds like he's in the made-up-his-mind box, and he can have a pop at Keir Starmer about that, but actually a lot of people think that more democracy and getting people more involved to help the political
There's no
class.
democracy.
It's perfectly democratic.
There's no democracy.
It's as democratic as an unelected House of Lords, isn't it?
Where is the democracy?
Isn't it? It's as democratic as an unelected House of Lords.
The unelected House of Lords just scrutinises legislation mainly, and actually, improves it in detail, and everything that goes through it ends up having to be agreed by the Commons anyway.
I happen to agree with you, but, you should be welcoming.
So it's got a different role. This isn't about scrutinising legislation. This is about shifting on a debate and involving people for whom there's no accountability. It's deliberately random. There's no accountability on their part at all. And I'm not saying they're all going to be lefties, but I am saying that many of them are going to be engaged in those topics. I mean, if you got the call from, whoever allocates these things and says, you've been picked for this panel and it's on railways, but your interest is actually in how to improve nature conservation, you might say, no, I'll give up on the railways one. I'll wait for the nature conservation one to come along because that's where I have my expertise. But you have your expertise almost certainly because you've got particular views on the topic.
And also, I mean, if this
You'll
is all
walk away from the random one.
If this is all about engagement, I imagine that a lot of people that are volunteering to do this kind of role, they're already politically engaged. If you're going to give up your weekends, often for just voluntary expense only, it's because you're politically engaged. So to me, you're not reaching this whole new breadth of people that you should be trying to engage. You're just talking and engaging with those already engaged. And speaking about engagement, Paddy says citizens' assemblies should only be a good idea if they replace the politicians that we have. And speaking of politicians, I was looking today, and I think we're up to 90 so far of the 650 sitting MPs have basically said that they won't run again for election. I've got to say, when you go through some of these MPs and their names and all the rest of it, and just the House of Commons more generally, really, half the people, no one even knows who they are. And it got me thinking, Kevin, do you think we've kind of moved on from the era where we used to have the kind of big titans of politics in the House of Commons representing people? Because a lot of people now, you won't be able to pick these people out of a lineup.
Yeah, well, so we have had more MPs standing down, I think, than in generations, decades, right? I think that some of the MPs are very well known. They're ex-cabinet. There are other members of Parliament who work very hard for 5, 10, 15 years and who are not household names. Absolutely. Why I think what's really interesting about this story, Michelle, today, and it links into my fellow guest, is there are so many Conservatives who have stood down, and the reason is they, I think, agree with Lord Moylan, who has been very vocal in the last week, that unless the Conservative Party get rid of Rishi, they haven't got a chance. And I think that's what's causing...
Well, I didn't say that. I haven't called for Rishi to go. What I've said is I think we should get on and have an early general election, because I don't think things... So, Kevin, your lip reading isn't working out very clearly. You need to take letter by letter when you put it...
What were you quoted as? I want to be very fair.
So there was a poll that said that there's a path to victory. I said... my view is, if you read my column, the column I had in the Sunday Telegraph yesterday, if you read it, it says clearly it's too late for a change of leadership. We're not going to do that. I think what we need to do is move on, because I don't myself see that things are going to get better. That's the government's wish.
That's all.
So you would want an early general election?
I think we should, I think this time we should think about having a general election.
Why?
Because I don't think, this is purely from a Conservative point of view, I don't think that the government's plan, the government's idea is things are going to get better over the next 9 or 10 months.
Yeah.
They have a better chance of winning. I don't see that happening. Some things might get better, other things are going to get worse. And I don't think a lot is going to change the way we're going. So that's what I said.
Well, isn't that quite defeatist, though? Because surely if you are...
Well, it isn't defeatist in a democracy to say... I shouldn't say this, I'll be shot for saying it, but it isn't defeatist in a democracy to say that occasionally the other guy should have a shot at running the show. That's what democracy is about. It's about alternating parties.
No, but they would get that at the next general election.
If Labour are going to win the next general election...
and do you think they will?
Well, all the polls seem to indicate it, and I don't know any better than
Do you think they should?
The opinion polls.
Do you think they should win?
I don't think they should, no, but I don't think they should win, but that's a different matter. If Labour are going to win, what are we going to do as a country? I mean, we want them to succeed. We want them to be a good government for the country, because that's something we're all invested in. And as I say, in a democracy, you can't spend all your time crying that occasionally you lose an election. That's because that's what democracy is about. It's about winning and occasionally, at least, losing. Otherwise, what's the point?
But then wouldn't you want to give yourself the longest runway possible between now and the next general election?
Well,
to
that's a
try
different
and
matter.
sort
That's a
things
question.
out?
That's a question for the government as to, or for the party leadership, as to which is going to be which is going to give you the best outcome in terms of number of seats, and that's a tactical issue where I'm not entirely sure that their plan is that it is going to work.
Well, Fan, I'll say to you at home, what do you think to that? Do you think, because it trends all over Twitter and X, whatever you call it these days, it trends all the time, doesn't it? Hashtag general election now. Is that the camp that you're in? Would you want to be going to the polls right now? Do you want a little bit longer? Do you think the Tories can turn it around? Do you think things can change or not? What are your thoughts on that? I'm fascinated to hear your response to that one. Also, as well, coming up on the show, I want to ask you a couple of things coming up. The firefighters, did you see this? A guy basically got trapped in floodwater. And I'm playing it on the screen, I'll describe it if you're listening. Firefighters just stood there basically waiting for specialist assistance to come because of health and safety. In walks a member of the public basically and helped sort it all out. Is health and safety, or are health and safety rules more hindrance than they are help? Also as well, I want to ask you, over 65-year-olds, do you think you should have to sit your driving test again? Tell me, I'll see you in 2.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. I was asking you, has anyone out there got any good news? Sheila says, yeah, what about the small but simple pleasures? The snowdrops are out here in Norfolk, she says, and the daffodils. Spring is on its way. Yes, it is. Also, Easter eggs as well. They've been in the shops for weeks now, haven't they? But anyway, let's talk health and safety, shall we? Because did you see this? A driver had to get rescued by passers-by. Long story short, I'll get some of this rescue up on the screen, actually, because He drove into a flooded area. As you can see on the screen, the water's gone up there, almost to the top now of the driver's side door. I'm just describing it in case you're listening to us. It's about 4 foot of flood water. Firefighters there, they just stood there basically watching on their radios. They're waiting for specialist assistance because of health and safety. They couldn't go in water that deep. I've got to say, apparently there's signs everywhere saying, you know, don't go into this area, it's flooded and all the rest of it. I don't want to victim blame or anything, but this fellow was a driving instructor. But parking that for a second, a member of the public goes in his waders, opens the door and gets the fella out. And I think to myself, health and safety, surely wouldn't you just sit there, Daniel, and go, look, that fella needs a bit of help, in I go? No?
I feel a bit conflicted about this. It's very easy to say that's what they should do, but it raises the question, what do we expect of people whom we pay a certain wage to in terms of the risks they take to their own lives and the threat to their own families from, you know, going in and doing something? I used to be deputy chairman of TfL, and people would say to me, why don't the bus drivers, you know, get out of their cab and confront the people who are causing mayhem on the lower deck? And I'd say, we don't pay them to do that. We don't pay them to danger money. We don't ask them to take risks with their lives, which it could be if they confront somebody who's armed with a knife. We give them contact, we give them radio contact with the centre, we get them in touch with people straight away, but we don't actually challenge our own employees to put their lives at risk. And we shouldn't be asking people to do that. Now, this is slightly different because you do expect fire people working in the firemen, fire people to...
Well, I'm trying to be politically correct.
What are they called nowadays?
Firefighters.
Well, they're not flood fighters, we'll call them. You do expect flood fighters to sort of, they will take certain risks as part of their normal work, but
look,
every
you can see
attempt...
the fella, the water was up to his knees.
Sorry?
The water was up to that firefighter's knees. I'm not asking him to go wading neck deep.
Yeah, no, I accept that. And maybe they should have done, but they did know there was a special team on the way that had the equipment.
It was going to take about an hour to get there,
They had some
apparently.
idea of how it was going, and presumably they might have been able to do something if the water had carried on rising, which apparently it didn't.
What do you think, Kevin? So basically, is the answer pay them more and people might risk their lives a little bit more?
I don't want to burst this balloon, Michelle, but my view of this story is we're in danger of, whatever it looks like with the footage you've described, actually... the crews there found the cars, the article said in the Mail, stuck in over 1.2 metres of flood water. They requested additional support. The driver got out of the car themselves, says the emergency services. And I'll always listen first to the emergency services, not a filmmaker who was passing by or the Daily Mail.
Yes, they did say that, but as I've just shown you on the footage, what actually happened was, according to the people that was there, the electrics had failed in the car, so this fellow apparently couldn't get himself out, but they had to double... there's some... I'm not a mechanic, but there's something that you can do on a car that if you do it twice or something, it overrides the lock and it allows you to open the door from the outside. So then the rescuer, there you go, look, you can see him there, he opens the door. Like, so the guy, that's the member of the public, he does that, he overrides the locking system. I really don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to car mechanics. Yeah. And then he helped the guy out. So, yes, physically, what the fire brigade is saying is, yes, you can see the member of public, the driver got himself out of the car, but only on assistance from this member of the public.
Yeah. Look, I think I'd like to wait for a full report from the county fire services there because they were in attendance and there's more to this than meets the eye.
So you can tell that you're a former local councillor. You see all these, let's wait for a public inquiry, let's wait for a report. My eyes, look, I wear glasses and everything, I can see what's going on.
Just the facts, Michelle.
What do you make to it? Has health and safety gone mad? Or is it all fair, actually protecting emergency services? And what about that notion that if we pay people more, they might be willing, perhaps, to take more risks? Where do you stand on that? Let's talk, shall we? We just mentioned a driving instructor there. Do you think when you get to the age of 65, whoever we are, we should have to retake our driving test? Yes or no? I'll see you in 2.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
Comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have 2 SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had 2 brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can turn down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
Yeah, the growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have,
exactly.
the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Former Labour councillor Kevin Craig and Conservative peer Lord Daniel Moylan alongside me. Let's cut to the chase. Do you think that you should have to retake your driving test once you hit 65 years of age? I mean, I've got to say right now, there's no mandatory testing or health screens or anything like that. Once you pass at 17 or whenever you do, quite frankly, then you are aware. I think you have to renew your licence every 3 years once you turn 17 in certain situations. I can tell you now, right, lots of people are getting in touch on Twitter and places like that and saying to me, this is a joke. They want to increase the pension age, and then all of a sudden they're using 65 potentially as a yardstick for a sign of, quote, old age to start testing. What do you think to these potential conversations about mandatory retesting?
Well, I don't think this is coming from the government. I think this is coming from a couple of people who seem to have started a petition, but they've offered no evidence whatsoever that people over 65 are causing more accidents or leading to more injuries or deaths. So I don't know what it is that's, you know, driving them. I'm quite open to being evidence-based about this, to be perfectly frank. If you come to me and you say there's evidence here that there's a particular group of people who are unsafe on the road generally, and maybe they should be asked to take their test again, or an eye test at least, or make sure they're not colourblind or whatever else it might be, then I would say, yeah, if there's evidence there to show it. But that doesn't seem to me that says automatically that's the elderly doing that. That might be a younger cohort. It might be different types of people. Who knows? And you come forward and you say, there's the evidence, we should do it. I say, yeah, safety on the road matters. A driving licence is not an absolute entitlement. You should be entitled to it if you're, you know, pass a test and you've got certain competencies and so on. You shouldn't, if you lose your sight, we wouldn't expect you to carry on having a driving licence. So I'd say, yeah, but this isn't based on any evidence at all, as far as I can see, that older people are more dangerous than anybody else.
Many people are saying it's the young that should have to retake their driving licence. What about 25-year-olds suggested? That is the age suggested by people getting in touch with me. Where are you on it, Kevin?
Well, I think I was just about to make that point, Michelle, that statistically the more dangerous driving cohort is the newly qualified in the first 5 or so years, particularly young men. But I think, like Daniel said, the common sense, I would say, British answer is it can only be a good thing to get checked again at 65. You get older, your eyes do get worse, your reactions slow down. It hopefully shouldn't, if there is evidence, I would hope it's not something that people get too irate about.
That's also something, I imagine, that's quite hard to be honest with yourself about. So when we're saying that you get older and things slow down and you might have cognitive decline or reactionary time-wise decline, I think admitting that to yourself, I imagine in some cases you don't want to admit that.
Absolutely. I think you make a very good point. But I think, as Daniel said, we're all of us, want safer roads. There has been some good progress, actually, in some areas. I think if there's evidence for it, most people will sign up for it.
Do you think? I find it fascinating what we're doing with car drivers at the moment, because you'll all be familiar with the fact that you've got 20-mile-an-hour zones popping up all over the place now. You've got all these ULEZ spaces. I was on the motorway at the weekend and I had to reduce my speed to 60 for air pollution reasons. And I thought...
Sheffield?
No, I was on the M4.
Oh, right.
And I thought, what...
They've done it down there as well.
Well, you're a transport man. What is the point in us? I mean, it was for such a short period of time.
I know.
And I thought, well, what in the grand scheme of life?
Oh, yeah, that's near Heathrow, Heathrow ULEZ. Yeah, they've got it on the M4 near Heathrow.
But what is that achieving in such a short space? Because it was a really short distance.
It achieves almost nothing. And the really funny thing is, if you're driving an electric vehicle that has no emissions, it still applies to you.
See, that is interesting.
You're still told you've got to go at 60 miles an hour. Why? You should be going at 80 or 90 or whatever, I don't know.
No, 70, Daniel, I think is the speed limit.
From an air pollution point of view, you are not making a difference.
But you see, I find that fascinating, because I do think there's this strange agenda going on, and I think he makes a really good point there. Why, if you are in an emission-free car, are you having to abide by emission zones, speed limits?
That is a good point, and I can see why people don't feel the logic to that. I mean, there is, of course, a bigger debate about pollution and air quality. And, the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, I know, are hugely controversial to people and they frustrate a lot of folks. I love to cycle, but I also love to drive. I get it from both sides. But the more that we can do to reduce road deaths and increase the quality of our air is a great thing.
I mean, last time I checked, I thought there was only one person who had air pollution listed as a cause of death.
I think there's more evidence than that, but, that's one to come back to.
What do you think, Twitter at home, anyway? Listen, you're having none of it, basically, when it comes to retesting older people. I really don't think anyone seems to be in favour of that at all. Andy says, by the way, the DVLA, they can't even clear the backlog of learner drivers. Never mind, how are you going to get all this spare capacity to suddenly start randomly retesting anyone at whatever age that potentially could be? I think you make a very good point. That notion about extending our pension age, increasing our pension age. So what about that? If we want to make people work longer, then surely we're expecting them to be in good health. So why on earth would we even consider? So if that does get debated in Parliament, one would hope then perhaps it's going to be a very short debate. Also, as well, Darren, he says, can you point out to all of your viewers it's International Tug of War Day? I got to confess, I did not know such a thing existed, although it doesn't surprise me. There's an international day for absolutely everything these days, isn't there? He says if anything gets a little bit too hot to handle on your programme, maybe that is a way of settling the debate.
Well, Kevin, have you brought the rope for Kevin and me?
Well,
I think you could put something like that on pay-per-view. Daniel at one end, Kevin at the other, a nice bit of fat rope in between them. I think people would actually pay to watch that. Would you? Are you one of those people? Anyway, look, that's all we've got time for. Lots of interesting discussion points have come up out of this. Labour policies, perhaps we'll get into those. One for another day. Citizen Assembly, I've got to say, there is not much love for those kind of things in my inbox tonight. And as I mentioned, people in Ireland getting in touch as well, saying that they don't like them. And of course, they are active there. Not a lot of love That was a tongue twister. Not a lot of love for smartphones in school as well. But look, Daniel as well, thank you for your company.
Michelle.
Thank you at home too. Nigel Farage is up next. I'll see you tomorrow night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather update. There will be a spell of wet and windy weather for many of us tomorrow, but before that, we do have a relatively quiet night ahead. That's because we have high pressure to the south of us, which is keeping our weather largely settled. That being said, a weak front is pushing its way eastwards across Scotland this evening, bringing some thick cloud and some outbreaks of rain for a time. Then through much of the night, for many of us, it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps some thickening cloud in